Hello and welcome to Racing News 365 answers your Italian Grand Prix questions from Racing News 365. Joining myself, Nick Golding, is 2023 Young Journalist of the Year, Sam Coop, and lead editor Ian Parks. Guys, there was so many talking points from Monza, and our fans have fired in some quite brilliant questions, so it did do. Sam, you can get the first one, and it comes from Nola Girl. Do you think Ferrari should have kept Carlos Sainz for next season?
Well, firstly, thank you very much for the question. It's certainly an interesting topic and one that I think we're going to end up discussing for the next 8 rounds and probably well into 2025, depending on how Lewis is performing. I personally think no. I think when you have the opportunity to sign the most decorated driver in F1 history, in terms of race wins, equal with Michael Schumacher in terms of titles, you take that opportunity. Yes, he will be 40 by the time he races for Ferrari, and he's struggled somewhat in terms of, say, qualifying in particular over the last couple of years. It's Lewis Hamilton. He still has that X factor, and I think Carlos is a very, very good driver. However, I just think he's special. The one counterpoint I'd make is that you have less of a overall team dynamic, perhaps. Carlos, whilst has been a match for Charles quite often, he does seem like he feels like a little bit of a number 2 driver, whereas I don't think you can ever put that at Lewis's feet. I think he will be fighting Charles for that for the hearts and minds of Ferrari and the Italian fans.
Good stuff, Nola Girl. Thank you very much for your question. Ian, you can answer the next one. And this one comes from Shiville. And apologies to any of the fans' questions that we'll answer if I pronounce your name incorrectly. Ian, why did Red Bull struggle so much in Monza?
First of all, you're going to struggle to get Nola Girl wrong, so I think you've actually got that one spot on. This one is a little bit more tricky, Shiville, but thank you very much for your question. Why did Red Bull struggle so much? We've basically, bottom line, the car now is so out of balance between front and rear, and the team is really struggling to get a handle on exactly just why that is the case. It's come into this season with an aggressive car that was more a revolution compared to the all-conquering RB19 of 2023. The RB20 was, as I say, more aggressive looking. They went a different road, and whilst it was relatively successful at the start of the season, the balance issues within the car were recognised quite early on. And what's happened from there on in is that as the team has applied updates to the car, it's made these balance issues even worse. And Red Bull is now in this vicious circle whereby if it tries to cure an issue at the front of the car, it then affects the rear. If it looks then towards the rear of the car, it then affects the front. So, as I say, it's got into this vicious circle at the minute. And in Monza in particular, exposed the weaknesses of the RB20 more than any other circuit, given the low downforce nature that Monza is. And another addition to that is that Red Bull did not take into the Italian Grand Prix, which every other team did, a Monza special rear wing. It actually brought in a wing that throughout the course of the weekend, as Max Verstappen went and admitted, it was constantly trimming to try and get it into the window. But it was so bad going into the race that actually it was the slowest car in the speed traps of the 10 teams. So it really found itself in a particularly bad window going into the Italian Grand Prix, from which it never fully recovered.
Definitely Red Bull are in a race against time to solve the problems. Shiville, thank you very much for your question. Ian, I'm going to stick with you for the next one because you spoke to McLaren team principal Andrea Stella after the race. What consequences does Oscar Piastri's overtake on the opening lap on Lando Norris have for the Australian driver?
Not specific consequences related to Oscar. What has now come out of the Italian Grand Prix and has been made clear by Andrea Stella is that the team is now going to start prioritising Lando over Oscar with regard to the Drivers' Championship, because they've recognised that actually it's not just the Constructors' Championship the team can win, it's also the drivers, given, with regard to my answer to the previous question, just how bad a shape Red Bull is in with its RB20. The gap between Max and Lando is 62 points. The gap between Max and Oscar is 106. Yes, there's 232 points left on the table, 25 points per win over the remaining 8 Grand Prix, a point per pass this lap, plus 3 sprints, 8 points per win. So you add all that up, 232 points. So yes, theoretically, Oscar has the points there on the table to overtake Max. However, as I say, McLaren recognise that given the nature of the championship as it stands, Lando is better placed than Oscar to go for that title. And I asked specifically Andrea at the after the Italian Grand Prix, how would Oscar feel when you tell him that this is the situation now, that you are going to start prioritising Lando? What's going to be his response, do you feel? And basically, as Andrea pointed out, these are still early days for Oscar. He's still young. He's still developing. His opportunity, his time will come. But right now, they have to consider not just him against Lando, it's the 1,000 people inside McLaren. And to use Andrea's words, the magnificent boost that the entire team will get if it could go ahead and win both titles, not just the constructors. And for Oscar, he has to be reminded that he would be playing his part in that this would be McLaren's first constructors title, obviously, that he was obviously playing a significant role in, first constructors title for 26 years. And obviously he would be helping Lando to some degree, if he's in a position to do so, for McLaren to gain its first driver's title since Lewis in 2008. There is a lot at stake. Oscar is a big part of that, but he's got to be reminded of the bigger picture, that it's a team game. It's not about 2 individuals. And as I mentioned to you, I do remember saying this in the F1 update on Sunday. Yes, whilst we always remember who the driver's champion might be from a particular year, we're less likely to remember who the constructors champion might be. But the bottom line is Formula One is a team game.
And it's the constructors where ultimately the teams get their prize money from. Ian, great answer. Luke, brilliant question. Thank you very much. Sam, will come to you with the next one. And it's a great one, given that with Charles Leclerc winning in Monza, we've now had 4 teams all win 3 races this season. This question comes from Oshi. How do you think this season, the remaining 8 races, will unfold? And is there anything that Red Bull can do to salvage the year?
A very good question. Thank you very much. A very expansive question. Nick, you're channeling all of those to me today.
Thank you very much.
But there is something, Red Bull can find something to alleviate its pains that Ian has very, very well described, that it's experiencing with the RB20. There is still time. They've got a 3-week gap after Baku and Singapore to minimise the hurt. I don't think they're going to be able to get back into the position they were earlier in the season, or even through the kind of mid part of the season. But I think they have enough time and opportunity to do enough to prevail, certainly in the Drivers' Championship with Max Verstappen. In the constructors, not only do they need help with the car, they also need Sergio Perez to take a step. He had a much better weekend in Monza, but he still isn't quite where they need for them to stem the flow against McLaren. And actually now, increasingly Ferrari. Ferrari are just 39 points behind with 8 rounds to go. And that is 3 points less than McLaren were behind 2 races ago. So you can see how quickly a swing can happen. And I've already spoken about Carlos Sainz, and he's He's a very good driver. He's been a match for Charles Leclerc. If Charles Leclerc can bring the levels of performance he has shown at Monza through the rest of the season, Ferrari can be right there in the mix as well. So the Constructors' Championship, very, very close. At the moment, as Toto Wolff himself said over the weekend, clearly McLaren are the favourites, even though they're 8 points back. I think Ferrari can also get themselves in that fight. There's a good chance Red Bull end up the season third.
Cool.
And that, from the start of the year, you just wouldn't have predicted that.
Yeah.
As for the Drivers' Championship, Charles is now 86 points behind with 8 rounds to go. I think he is right at the limit of how far back he can be to at least make things difficult. And whilst he may have a very slim, he is a proper outlier in this, a proper outside candidate. He can make life difficult for Lando and for Max. He will be part of the equation, whether or not he is the one who actually kind of gets over the line first, which I think is unlikely. However, Lando has made enough progress, Monza aside and everything that comes with that and missed opportunities. He has done well enough in the last 2 races, points-wise, or Max has done not well enough on the other side of it. At 62 points, he is close enough that at the current trajectory, we'll get to Abu Dhabi and the championship will basically come down to the final round. So ultimately, how it will unfold, it's going to ebb and flow between not only those 3 teams and Mercedes. We've got a 3-horse race, I think, in both championships. So that's how the rest of the season's going to unfold. And I just don't think you can map where those highs and lows are going to come.
We're not even doing bold predictions in this video, and you've gone and predicted Red Bull could finish third. That's some statement. Oshi, thank you very, very much for your question. Moving on to the final question, and we can all answer this one. It comes from Joseph. Who do we think is going to get the final spots on the grid for next year? Of course, only 2 seats now available, the one at Stake F1 and the one at RB, because obviously the Mercedes seat has now been officially filled by Andrea Kimi Antonelli in the worst kept secret of F1 this year. That was announced ahead of third practice on Saturday in Monza. I'm going to go with my prediction first, and Matteo Binotto, the new Sauber CEO, overlooking the merger of Audi, obviously Audi's takeover, hinted over the weekend that reserve driver Teo Pourchaire and F2 McLaren Juniors, Gabriel Bortoleto, are both on their list. And of course, we know that Valtteri Bottas and Zhou Guanyu would both also very much like to stay with the outfit. I've got a feeling now that it's going to be, in just my personal opinion, it's going to be for that seat either Pourchaire or Bortoleto. In terms of RB, well, I think it's going to be either Lawson or Ricciardo. I mean, the big question really there is whether Perez is retained for 2025, because I can still see in my head that Ricciardo is going to potentially end up, or Lawson at Red Bull. And I think really that entire RB Red Bull story and who gets the RB seat all depends on what happens with Perez. Sam, your thoughts?
I agree with you on the stake situation. And also, I don't know, to our fans, if you watch F2 and also F3, absolutely stunning title fight at Monza. If you haven't seen that, watch that. But in the feature race in F2, Gabriel Bortoleto started 22nd and won that race. The safety car had a hand in it, but he also won dominantly once put to the front through fortunate strategy, and he did that in front of Matteo Binotto. So he, I think, is in the prime position now. He's looking very, very good. Pourchaire also travelled to Monza over the weekend. Was that to restart talks potentially? I'm going to throw another candidate in the mix. And I think this is a driver who can follow the blueprint that Liam Lawson has set, as Liam Lawson never won a feature race in F2. Came in, did a very good job at RB, and is now seen as someone who can't escape getting an F1 drive. He has to at some point. I think Franco Colapinto, his management team, will be pushing at stake for that opportunity. They're going to say, look, this will be a driver who can come in with 9 races experience, and he's started on the right foot. He's done very well. He's already ahead of Valtteri Bottas in the Drivers' Championship because he finished 12th. I think Colapinto's management will also be pushing for that seat, so there could be a surprise candidate in the mix for the stake seat. When it comes to RB, I think it'll be Lawson. I think they'll then keep Tsunoda alongside Lawson because they want him to be able to learn from him. They want some balance in that lineup. I think the Red Bull seat then becomes Ricciardo or Perez, and I think it's probably going to go to Ricciardo at this point.
Ian, bring us home.
Well, Helmut Marko has made it quite clear that Liam Lawson is going to be driving in F1 next season. So if that's not the case, then Helmut's going to be left with an awful lot of egg on his face. And Helmut is not a guy that I've ever seen with egg on his face before when it comes to what he does with his junior drivers. He's always been very forthright, very clear, and what he says goes when it comes to things like that. So Liam Lawson definitely in at RB because as much as I like Daniel, I just don't feel he's doing quite enough at the moment to retain that seat for next season. He's going to have to come with an awful lot over these remaining 8 races for him to keep hold of that, unless of course Sergio Perez, a decision is taken over him at Red Bull, and Red Bull decide we want a new number 2 alongside Max. So then what does the choice become? And I can't really go much further than your choices with Stake and Audi, to be honest. I mean, a lot of noise going into the Italian Grand Prix weekend that Valtteri Bottas was the favourite. Well, I asked Valtteri quite specifically, what deal are you looking for? And he wants a multi-year deal. I don't think Stake/Audi are willing to offer Valtteri a multi-year deal. Whereas Zhou Guanyu, I asked him the same question. He'd be willing to accept a 1-year deal, which might just play into the thoughts of Mattia and new team principal Jonathan Wheatley when he comes on board next July. But I doubt it very much, because the one thing Mattia did quite categorically state in a press conference he held on Sunday at Monza was that he wanted to get this decision done and dusted quite quickly, didn't want it dragging over for too much longer. So he's got a lot to mull over. Bortoletto would be a good choice, because let's face it, they got the experienced guy in Nico Hulkenberg. Do they really want 2 experienced guys? Or do they want somebody that, like a lot of teams have shown these days going into next season, they're willing to take the gamble on a young rookie driver? And obviously Mercedes, it's Antonelli, one of their juniors. Obviously with Haas, through Haas's connections with Ferrari, they're taking on Oliver Behrman, so that's why he's in the seat there. And it's looking fascinating that we could have a number of rookie drivers. Oh, and of course, how can I forget Jack Doohan at Alpine, of course. So again, one of their junior drivers coming through. So yeah, it could be fascinating to see who they eventually pick, but good choices. Carlo Pinto, can't rule him out. I don't think so, because Williams is so heavily invested in his development. And I think they would rather have him in the car at some point in their team further down the line rather than letting him go so early to another team. We'll have to wait and see. But yeah, it's still a lot to call over these 2 seats. But for me, definitely Liam Lawson is for me cut and dried with RB for next season.
Joseph, thank you very much for your question. To everyone who sent in questions, thank you very, very much. Be sure to smash that like button, subscribe to the channel. This has been Racing News 365. Answers F1 fan question from the Italian Grand Prix. My name's been Nick Golding, and I've been joined by Sam Coop and Ian Parks. We will see you in the next video. See you later.